All right, the big story that we're tracking for you this hour, the London terror attack. So far, here's what we know. We do not know any of the three attackers who were shot and killed by police Saturday night. They've not been identified yet, but a UK newspaper, the Telegraph, is in fact reporting some interesting details. We're going to quote that. The Telegraph says one of the London Bridge suspect, the attackers, apparently appeared in a jihadi documentary on Channel 4. He had previously tried to go to Syria. The Telegraph reports that the attacker appeared in a TV documentary last year about British extremists called the Jihadis Next Door, and he was filmed at events attended by two notorious Islamic preachers. News agencies also quoted UK's Met, the Metropolitan Police, that one of the attackers was of Pakistani origin. Police described the attacker as a jihadi living next door. ANI reports that the attacker's identity was revealed through a former friend who had contacted UK authorities about the extremist views and claimed that his father had gotten increasingly radicalized by watching videos. So quite a bit of interesting development there. Again, here's how all of this broke out. It was Saturday night around 10 o'clock in the evening. People were out and about enjoying their Saturday. Then, out of nowhere, around 10 o'clock at London Bridge, a van drives up, rams passengers onto the pedestrian way. Innocent bystanders are killed. Many people have no idea what's happening out. Then the suspects jump out of the vehicle. They go on a stabbing spree. People duck for cover. This is at the Borough Market. People run to nearby cafes and bars, hide under tables. Ultimately, 7 people lost their lives Saturday night, the third terror attack in the UK. But within 8 minutes, police were able to get to the scene and neutralize and shoot and kill all 3 of the suspects. It is being labeled as a terror attack on UK soil. So that is the latest information that we have at this point. But as we reported, is this giving more clues? One of the attackers apparently appearing on a documentary on Channel 4. To get more perspective about this story, let's now go to our guest joining us live now. We have Joel Whitaker, security analyst, joining us live from northern Iraq. We also have Emil Gesson, a former Royal Marine Commando, joining us from the UK. We've talked to both of you extensively throughout Sunday. We appreciate your time. We have you back on this program. What I want to talk to you guys about is the fact that this man may have appeared in a documentary. It seems like there was already some reporting that he may have been on a list, but perhaps authorities not doing enough to thwart the terror attack. Again, I do want to point out that we do know from the numerous interviews we've seen, it took them 8 minutes to stop and neutralize the attackers. But the fact that he's appeared on this video on Channel 4, that certainly sheds light that there perhaps is a larger jihadi group operating in the UK. Let me start with Emil first. Emil, this is something that we addressed a little bit yesterday, but didn't go so much in depth. What do we make of this report by the Telegraph?
The report on who these guys are, I believe Sky News have just released the name of one of the suspects recently now. It's coming out live now. Yeah, the documentary, Jihadi Next Door, brilliant documentary by Channel 4 last year. And it just highlights how many people are out there that want to cause harm in the United Kingdom. As I keep repeating, there's an insurgency going on here, and it's generally second, third generation Muslim men and women who are living amongst us who are carrying out these attacks. And this is the thing that we need to look at with the new government coming in, is how they're going to tackle it. Because people in the United Kingdom and in Europe are fed up now with continuous attacks happening in our countries. So how extreme are the government going to be? The fact is that these people are openly preaching hate on the streets of the UK here. And the law, the way it is, the police hands are tied. The intelligence service know who the majority of these guys are. They're on watch lists, as we call them. But until they actually carry out a criminal act, they can't be arrested. And as I was explained before, they can't put them on all these thousands of people under surveillance 24 hours a day. So there is no doubt it is the jihadi next door at the moment. And people in the UK are getting fed up with terrorist attack after terrorist attack. So the government needs to take a strong stance now dealing with this problem.
All right, let me go over to Joel Whitaker standing by. Joel, you're a security analyst. I want to report to what some of the UK media are reporting. They're actually saying that the brother of one of the terrorists was a soldier, according to the Daily Mail. In fact, the killer, 27-year-old, according to the Daily Mail, says he was traumatized since the age of 12, and he was traumatized after he found his brother dead. He was an Army Reserve soldier. That's what we're picking up from UK media. I mean, it's still a little bit early on to extrapolate, but getting a little bit more perspective, a little bit more light, and another media outlet reporting that he may have been of Pakistani origin. Still early, they're not releasing a whole lot of details, the Met or the Scotland Yard, but we're picking up what sources from the UK media reporting. How surprised are you by some of these facts that are not coming forward, even though it's still early to speculate? Joel?
Yeah, I think over the next few days, week, a lot more information is going to come out in the media about exactly who these terrorists were. And not surprising at all. It's down to the security services to get at this information as quickly as possible. They will want to establish the facts because they will want to find out if there's more involvement of a terrorist, if there's some kind of cell, some kind of terrorist cell or cells within the UK, which clearly there will be. This was an organised attack, and okay, it was just 3 people, but 3 people came together and decided to hire a van and then smash that into people and then stab people. So those 3 people came together from somewhere. And so that in itself is a bit of a terrorist cell. The police security service will certainly be looking further into that, looking for more information where they can get it. And it's quite interesting actually reading the information coming out of the newspapers at the moment. You mentioned the Telegraph, the Independent too. These people are being reported. This information is being reported. If you go back just one day ago to Theresa May, one of her speeches on the television about what they're doing about terrorism within the UK, a main point she came out with was that that it's unacceptable, the extremism within the UK. They clearly know it's an issue, but as your previous guest just mentioned, it's resources. That's a lot of people out there who are willing to commit harm or even turn a blind eye to terrorists or potential terrorists. So that clearly is the next step for the government to deal with the homegrown terrorism.
All right, Emil, let me go back to you regarding that, the fact that, perhaps he may have been on this video, perhaps they may have had some insights, authorities may have had him on a terror watch list. Again, we don't have the identity and the name independently confirmed of the 3 terrorists who were shot and killed by police, but the fact that he appeared in a Channel 4 documentary, we've seen this before, Jihadi John, we've seen such a prevalent amount of, terror or homegrown terror or copycat terrorism that's happened in the UK. Why is that the case? As we wait to find out more information about these terrorists?
I actually went to the same school in London as Mohammed Awazi, Jihadi John, St Mary Magdalene's in Westminster, London. He was 3 years younger than me, but he was brought up in the same school, Church of England. He lived 400 metres from where I lived in London. My father's Syrian, his family are Kuwaiti. So when you look at the backgrounds here, it's how does a man like that become radicalised? I then went off to join the Royal Marines. I served for 12 years before becoming a documentary maker, which I do now. But to understand why these men are radicalised, people need to start looking at the grassroots here to get to it. And is it amongst the Islamic community where it's happening inside mosques, clubs, social gatherings, or is it online? Because at the moment, a lot of these men are being radicalised under our noses. And I think social media plays a big part in this, especially from my work in the documentaries world, online social media platforms I use. And I do a lot of research out there. And there's so many men out there who are preaching hate online. And companies like Twitter, Facebook and YouTube need to start clamping down on this because young men are becoming radicalised very easily. And generally, they come from backgrounds, this is a generalisation, but they do come from backgrounds of petty crime and out of trouble with the police. And this is why they're known to the authorities to start with. But we need to start looking at the Islamic community. It's the elephant in the room that no one really wants to talk about, and who's to blame here. And I'm not blaming Muslims at all because my background's being half Syrian as such, but the Islamic community needs to do more in the preventing of the radicalisation of these young men. And knowing that, I think, comes down to, as I was saying, the grassroots of things, of parents monitoring their children, family members, the mosques, groups, online platforms. Everyone needs to start monitoring what's going on and where things are going wrong, because we're hearing time after time after time now that these men were alerted to people knew with their extreme views. And as you see, as you're saying there, starring in that documentary last year, there was another guy in that documentary who was killed out in Syria. It just goes to show that they're on our streets and they're preaching hate and nothing's really getting done. So I think the government needs to take a tougher stance because the intelligence service does a brilliant job, the police do a brilliant job, but as I was saying earlier, I think their hands are tied. With Theresa May saying enough's enough and she's going to review our terrorism system, I think whoever comes into power on Friday really needs to start looking into this because a lot of people are fed up in the UK now and in Europe because these people are amongst us and nothing's getting done.
All right. I also want to give a quick update that we're seeing from media reports from the UK about some of the victims. We haven't released any of the identities just yet, but we're seeing a Canadian, a French citizen, 2 Australians, somebody from Spain, and a New Zealander. About the 7 people, again, 7 people killed, around 48 others hurt, 21 in critical condition. Joel, let me go back to you. You know, in situations like this, when there is a terror attack, we quickly hear about the victims, unfortunately, and the terrorists, but it's usually the terrorists whose names are plastered. They're the names that are always, you know, out and about. We see, you know, the suspects' names out and about. We haven't seen it just yet, but why does it take authorities so long to, you know, give that information out there so people know the identities and who these attackers were?
Yeah, often this is part of ongoing operations, and so obviously after an attack, the security services, the intelligence services will be looking like really quite deeply into the backgrounds of the attackers. They'll know the identity reasonably quickly, but that information they might not want out there in the public domain because of an ongoing security operation. You know, they're chasing up links, they're finding out who that terrorist knew, because they're looking potentially for a cell, as I spoke about earlier on, a terrorist cell, links to other terrorist networks, payers, things like that. So it's really a security issue why they wouldn't necessarily give the name out there. They also, looking at it a bit more long term, don't want particularly to highlight a terrorist name and give them any kind of fame. You know, these people are abhorrent. What they do is abhorrent. The security services, like everybody else in the Western world, does not want to make these people into martyrs by splashing their name across the newspapers too much. But certainly in the first instance, it's really down to security issues. They will be chasing up information in relation to the names of the terrorists, and therefore they might not want that out in public domain because of that.
And Joel, let me also ask you regarding, with regards to situations like this, why do we see so many situations in the UK? You know, why are there certain pockets? Are there recruits? You know, the groups like ISIS or Al Qaeda, are they recruiting more in the UK? Why do we see so much of a presence from the UK, at least, when it comes to terror groups? I'm not trying to single out the UK, but 3 incidences this year alone. Certainly, there could be a pattern that maybe we could extrapolate.
Yeah, I think Emil, you're over guessing it quite well in that it's often from sort of troubled backgrounds, troubled families, and because they're easy targets, and that's the same globally. If you look at, to sort of pull it away from the UK for a moment, you look at Somalia. You know, there is no hope for most people in Somalia. There is no work, there is no food, there is no clean water. So they're easy pickings for terrorist groups. And Somalia's been a failed state for a long time. Bring that back into the UK, where you've got pockets, communities that aren't particularly integrating, and that's an issue across the UK. And then you add to that the lack of integration with UK society. You add to that, poverty. Then it's an easier pickings for terrorist groups to hone in at. Because if you've got no hope, why do you care? You know, you don't care about the future if you've got nothing to hope for. And so therefore we tend to see sort of poorer pockets in the UK targeted more than let's say the middle class. But the middle class are also have in the past been turned into terrorists too.
All right, let me go back to Emil standing by as well. Emil, you know, I know it's difficult to pinpoint or blame anybody, but at this point in terms of security, even though authorities were able to thwart and neutralize the attackers in 8 minutes, which is remarkable, the fact that they perhaps may have known about these individuals from that Channel 4 documentary, that jihadi documentary, I mean, at this point, is there some level of responsibility that they have to take? That did they make a mistake? Did they let them go? Or the big question is, could this have been prevented?
Of course, these are the sort of questions people are going to be asking now. But let's not be under any illusion about the British intelligence service, how great they are in domestically and internationally. We know how good the Brits are, and they're doing a brilliant job here. And as they say, the terrorists only got to get it right once, and they've got it right 3 times now in the last few weeks here. So could they have done more? Of course they could have done more. Everyone can do more, whatever profession they are. However, let's not start laying blame on the intelligence service here. Yeah, they're known to people. And as we were saying, and Joel was saying, is they're limited on money, they're limited on manpower and resources. They can't monitor these men 24/7 a day. So if there's no online intelligence picture to suggest these men are going to carry out an attack, the intelligence services aren't really going to know it's going to be happening. However, this is what I was saying earlier, the government needs to start looking at, and these people who are known for extreme behaviour, extreme ideas, need to be monitored a lot closer. And knowing that, maybe the law needs to change in preventing these people from being on the streets. And this is what the feelings I'm getting from a lot of people at the moment, is people want to know, if they're known to the government, they're known to the intelligence service, and they have extreme views, why are they still out in the public domain? Why are they still walking around in the streets? Of course, until they commit an actual offence, they can't be arrested. And this is where we need to start looking at, with the new government, to start changing law potentially, because at the moment, like I keep repeating, it's an insurgency that's going on, and they're walking amongst us. And the fact is, they're even starring on television. It goes to show it's ridiculous, isn't it? And so there's no doubt these guys will all be known to the intelligence service, as majority of them are. But as we've seen how quick the police responded, 8 minutes, and also within a few hours, they're doing house arrests, following up these people's network, because these people aren't working alone. There's a network out there. And going back to what you're saying regards naming these guys, I don't think it's important to name them now, and we can wait for that, because the intelligence service are doing their job following up leads. All
right, we're going to actually interrupt really quickly. We are getting more breaking news. Take a look on your screen. These are the images of the 2 men shot and killed by police during that terrorist attack. This just released by the Metropolitan Police. The Met's Counter-Terrorism Command have released the names as well as the pictures of the 2 men shot and killed by police during Saturday's attack at the London Bridge and the Borough Market. We're still waiting on the formal identification, the formal process that is still yet to take place, but they believe that the attackers' identities were known. They believe the 2 of the men are Quram Shahzad Boot and Rashid Radoun, both from Barking, that is east of London. Take a good look. These are the suspects that police, the Met, is now released. All 3 men were confronted and shot dead by police and armed officers within 8 minutes of that first call. Getting more details at this point, 27-year-old Quram Shahzad Boot, as well as the other suspect. Quram was a British citizen. He was born in Pakistan. The other suspect, Rashid Radwan, on the other side of your screen over there, he's a 30-year-old. He's claimed to be of Moroccan and Libyan descent. He used the name earlier, Rashid El Khtar, with a different date of birth. Inquiries and investigations are still going on to figure out the name and the identity of the third accomplice. We don't have those images just yet. Again, these are the 2 suspects that police have now released a little bit of details at this point. So a lot of breaking news developing, coming in at this point. Let me go back to our guests joining us at this point. Joel, it looks like perhaps the Met may have overheard our conversation. We were just talking about that earlier on. Why do we not have more information about this? But one we believe is of Pakistani descent, one of Moroccan or Libyan descent, perhaps inspired by other groups. At this point, we don't have the identity of the third suspect yet. We do know all 3 were shot and killed. Again, this looks like at this point another group of homegrown terror. What is being done? Theresa May or the next leader of the UK will have to do something, certainly, to address national security. Joel, how important is that going to be in the coming days, as voters now have to deal with that as they head to the polls?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's obviously very important. I think there's a good chance it may sway people towards voting one way or the other, depending on what they perceive to be the strongest security provider. In times of crisis, people look to strength, and people certainly look to strong leaders. If you go back in history of the UK, in fairly recent history, sort of World War II, we had a Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, who was known to be very charismatic, but certainly a strong character. During the Second World War, people really respected him, and he did a really good job. But after the Second World War, the time of crisis was over. Boom, out. He was gone. Times of crisis, people look to strong leadership. So whichever party shows the strongest leadership in the lead up to the election is likely to sway votes. All
right. Again, a quick update for those of you just joining in. These are the 2 individuals, the 2 suspects the Met has just released. 2 of the 3 suspects that we know from Saturday's deadly terror attack where 7 people were killed. Again, take a good look. These are the images just coming in. We have both these suspects here released by the Met's counter-terrorism group. One of them is Kuram Shahzad Boot. The other one is Rashid Redwan on the right of your screen over there. They're both from Barking, that is east of London. All three of the suspects, police were able to confront them, neutralize this attack within 8 minutes. In that time, unfortunately, 7 people were killed, more than 48 others sent to the hospital. Getting more clarity and more information about the attackers, 27-year-old Kuram Shahzad Boot. He was a British citizen. He was born in Pakistan, and over here, onto the right of your screen, a Moroccan or a Libyan descent suspect. He'd earlier used the name Rashid El-Qadar. He had a different date of birth, the conflicting date of birth. Still trying to get more information about the third attacker, the third suspect. Earlier on, we were discussing about the fact that some of these men, or all of them perhaps, appeared on a video on Channel 4, a documentary. So perhaps they were on a watch list. Perhaps police knew about them. There were blurred images we saw earlier on in the broadcast about these suspects. Again, so certainly a very interesting dynamic here with regards to the 3 suspects, getting more clarity about their identities and if there are perhaps other attackers or other groups out there. All right, let me now go over to Emil joining us with regards to this. Emil, we have a little bit more clarity now. We talked about this earlier on, that video, the documentary, the Met releasing these images of the suspects, one of Pakistani descent, one of Moroccan or Libyan descent. You told us earlier that you, in fact, went to the same school as Jihadi John. You live not too far away from him. Let's talk about this area. The fact that both of these suspects were from an area called Barking, east of London. Maybe shed some light about that area. What type of an area is that? Is it known for perhaps that is not the most socioeconomic place? Or get us some perspective about that area for our viewers.
Yeah, generally East London there's a lot of Muslims, a big Islamic community within East London and in the Barking region. It's quite interesting. The fact is that one of these is Pakistan descent and one of them potentially Moroccan or Libyan. So the police at the moment be trying to piece together how these individuals, all 3 of them, have come together, as well as the other people that have been arrested, and how this network is connected itself within East London. But yeah, you could say that parts of East London are deprived, but compared to other countries and other regions, is still affluent in the sense that it's still London. So why these young men have gone to good schools, have had a good education, are turning to radicalisation? But like I was saying, the police will be very interested in how these men are connecting, and they'll be working that out very soon to piece it together to find out where these guys actually became radicalised. And it's interesting. The fact is that we're live now, and it's breaking news on the guys being named now and what descent they were. But as we saw, the Manchester bomber as well, Libyan descent. He was known to the police. These 2 guys will be known to the police, and the third one, no doubt, will be known to the police. So a lot of questions will be getting asked at the moment now to find out where has it gone wrong.
And Emil, I also want to sort of follow up with that question you mentioned about the Manchester attack. It happened about 2 weeks ago. In fact, 2 weeks to the exact moment, 2 Mondays ago, when everybody was at Ariana Grande concert there, 22 people killed. And this happening less than 2 weeks after that, just days before people head to the polls there. The fact that that was a Libyan attacker, this was a Moroccan or Libyan, and then another one of Pakistani descent. Typically, after some of these terror attacks, we see a lot of police raids, just like what we saw in Molenbeek in Belgium. And, police really raiding out to make sure there are no other future attackers or perhaps future clues as they continue their investigation. What are we expecting now that the Met's counterterrorism force has released these images? We don't know the third identity just yet, but what do we expect to happen in terms of their investigation, in terms of what the Met will release? Do we expect more raids, or where will this investigation now focus in on?
The way they'll be operating is they'll be trickle-feeding information to the media. The issue we had in the United Kingdom with the Manchester bomber is the American intelligence service named him before the British wanted the name public. And that hindered the investigation, because guys who were probably connected to his network probably went underground, making it harder for the security forces to chase them up. People are aware that Special Forces, SAS and SBS are operating within the UK mainland in conjunction with the police. So they'll be following up leads. They'll be probably doing more house arrests, trying to piece together this network and where they are and how it's happened. But as we saw in the London attack, London Bridge is very low level compared to what we saw in Manchester. The fact in Manchester, it was a suicide attack with explosives compared to a van with knives. They're totally two different levels. But as we know, it's Ramadan at the moment. Across the globe, terrorist attacks and attacks spike at this time of year. So it's not unlikely. We expected it. We went to critical security level. We're now back down to severe. And in the UK, we know there's going to potentially be another attack. So at the moment, the cops and the intelligence service would just be piecing together what's going on, following up their leads. But no doubt there'll be more arrests in the coming days.
Could be more arrests coming in the days to come. We'll have to wait and watch. Let me go over really quickly to Joel Whitaker, standing by in Northern Iraq, a security analyst. Joel, you deal with situations like this all the time in combat zone, dealing with perhaps violence and terror. Let me also ask you a follow-up question with regards to what Theresa May said yesterday. On Sunday, she talked about the internet perhaps needs to be more regulated because many terrorists sometimes find a safe space, a haven perhaps online to discuss their plans, to plan attacks possibly like this one, and that cyberspace companies need to do more to infringe and prevent situations like this. How do you think that is going to resonate? Is that doable? Is that something that really may go well with the people of UK or Europe, given what they've seen, or is that really going to be difficult to implement?
Yeah, the UK have got GCHQ, which is the sort of digital surveillance spies of the UK, if you like, and they're very effective in what they do, but they will be, hugely, I wouldn't say necessarily under-resourced, but they'll be very, very busy people at the moment. And it may be that the government might need to bring in more specialists to assist in online surveillance. And the critical thing is if a group has already popped up onto Facebook and then they close it down, they're reactive. So already people have got together, they've talked, they've possibly plotted and planned an attack. Certainly there's a group already together, and I'm sure they've got more than one link to each other than just Facebook, telephone number. So being reactive is not key here. What's key is being proactive and getting at the groups before they even get online. And that's done through intelligence in the communities where terrorists or potential terrorists are being homegrown. So if you look at somewhere like Barking, where we've seen quite a lot of activity recently, it is having ground truth, intelligence on the ground, feeding back information to the security services, and then critically, and what's been at fault, we think, quite recently, is the reaction of then the security forces following up on that information and dealing with it appropriately. Clearly, that has not been the case fully over the last few years, as we can see on the attack in London, the attack in Manchester, and the attack prior to that on Westminster Bridge.
All right, Joel, we appreciate that input. Again, I want to do a quick recap of everything that we know this hour. Police are now releasing more information about the London attackers. 2 of the attackers' identities and images have now been released by the Met's counter-terrorism force. Take a look. These are the images police have now released of the terror attack from Saturday. It happened at London Bridge and Borough Market. 7 people were killed, more than 48 people hurt. It happened Saturday night around 10 o'clock. Now, these are the images just coming in to the newsroom. The information, Kuram Shahzad Boot and Rashid Redwan, the suspects. Police have yet not named the 3rd suspect just yet, but we do know that both of them were from England, one of them from Pakistani origin, the other one from Libyan or Moroccan descent, both from East London in an area called Barking. Let's go to Joel Whitaker, standing by in Northern Iraq. Joel, let's talk about, the fact that we have these images that have been released. It took more than, 48 hours since this happened. What is going to happen in the coming days? More raids? What will the investigation now focus on?
Yeah, and it could be that, the security services have run out of sort of leads, and now that's why the names are getting given out, so there could potentially more people may come forward with information. Who knows? That's conjecture, but that's potentially the case. And looking ahead, as Emil said, they'll be looking into links. Certainly, it would seem that it's separate types of attacks. Well, there certainly were separate types of attacks in London and then up in Manchester. One was a very large bomb, where you would really think that to have such a large bomb, particularly within the UK, with such tough border control, there certainly would have been quite a big community of terrorist network or potentially criminal activity involved too. And so looking forward, the security services will be looking into terrorist groups, but also criminal activity and how the criminals and terrorists could be linked in together.
All right, let's go over to Emil Gesson, a former Royal Marine Commando. Emil, my question to you regarding this, we have a little bit more information, a little bit more clarity about the suspects. 2 of the 3, their images, their names, and a little bit about their descent has now been released. Libyan or Moroccan, the other one of Pakistani origin. We know they were in Barking, East London. The raids will now more than likely focus in on that area. What do we make of this information? Talk to us about that area and where this investigation will now focus, happening just about 2 weeks since the other concert attack in Manchester.
Yeah, as I was explaining, the difference in the level between attacks in Manchester and attacks in London is, like I was saying, is very low level. So potentially, have they got links elsewhere in the world? Have they been to the Caliphate? Have they been to Iraq, Syria or Libya? These are the questions the intelligence service will be following up at the moment. But as we saw with Manchester bomber, he had just recently returned from Libya. So the fact he was known to the police. He returned from Libya. Why wasn't he flagged up at the airport? So these are sort of questions, and the intelligence service will be looking into. Regards these men with knives, and you think about the kind of attacks they're doing. They're killing innocent people on a night out, on a Saturday night, with stabbing women, attacking children at a concert. These are the sort of attacks that these men, these brutes, are conducting on our streets here. But the police will be investigating all leads at the moment. They'll be looking into, is the network international or is the network within the UK? But there's no doubt that because it's a low level, it would suggest to me that their network's probably UK-based. But as we know, Islamic State, they will claim responsibility to any attack that's involved in a Muslim. But the fact is, we're hearing reports from people that they when they debust from the vehicle, stabbing people, shouting, "This is for Allah, this is for my family." So it didn't take long for Islamic State to jump on and say, yeah, they're soldiers of Allah here. But the network, potentially could be a bigger network out there, but the police will be investigating and looking into it. And they'll be starting in the Barking, East London area, which is a large Muslim community.
And as again, we do know a little bit of information we're getting from some of the media in the UK about the victims. We don't have all of their names and identities just yet, but a French citizen, a Canadian, 2 Australians, a Spaniard, a New Zealander. So getting a little bit more clarity about some of the 7 victims who were killed in that stabbing spree that took place on Saturday night. Emil, we also learned earlier, we talked about the video that emerged on Channel 4. Perhaps these people were known to authorities on a watch list, a terror group, and yet this still happened. I mean, it is difficult to pinpoint and sort of blame any group or any one such organization. They did respond to this attack in 8 minutes and neutralize the attackers, but that will be the investigation focusing on security. How crucial is that going to be to thwart future attacks? What needs to happen, and where do you think this will go?
Of course, there'll be scrutiny over this, and people will be asking questions about. They were known to the intelligence service, why weren't they active? But as I explained earlier, unless they've carried out a criminal act, they can't be arrested. There isn't the resources, as I was saying earlier, to monitor these men 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not possible. So this is what we need to start looking at. Do we need to increase the manpower and the resources for the intelligence service for these people on this so-called watch list so we can monitor more of them? Or do we allow them to just continue in society until they carry out a crime? But as we know, prevention is better than cure, and I think the government needs to start investing more money into the intelligence service, who are doing a fantastic job, as I keep saying. So these men that are on the watch list, we know exactly where they are and what they're doing. And knowing that, the fact is that these people are on watch lists. Why haven't their passports been surrendered? Why haven't their passports been taken off them? I don't know about these guys in London, if they actually travelled abroad, but anyone who's on a terrorist watch list should not be travelling outside the UK. For obvious reasons. So they'll be following up these leads, looking into these kind of things. But who's to blame for it? We can't blame anyone other than Islamic extremists. They're the only people to blame here. We can finger point at the intelligence service and the police and the government, but it's not really. It's the guys who are carrying out these attacks. So the blame lays with these people here, and in my opinion, the Islamic community needs to start looking closer at what's going on within their communities. And as we know about the Pakistan community here in the UK, they're not integrating, as well as along with Bangladeshis and Somalis. They don't integrate as much as other cultures within the society. So I think a lot more needs to be done by mosques and these groups and schools on reporting these men.
All right, let's now go over to WION's London Bureau Chief, Mandy Clark, joining us over the phone with the very latest. Mandy, thanks for joining us. A quick update. Here's what we know at this hour. 2 of the 3 suspects in the London terror attacks have just been identified by the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Task Force. Take a look behind me. These are the suspects. Khurram Shahzad Abood, he's a 27-year-old British citizen born in Pakistan. And then on the right, you have Rashid Redwan, a 30-year-old who is believed to be of Moroccan or Libyan descent. Mandy, we understand from authorities that both of these suspects were from Barking, that's east of London. Shed some light to us about that area and the fact that we do know at this point that one is Pakistani of origin and the other one is of Libyan or Moroccan descent, and how vital that information is as the investigation continues.
Well, certainly Barking, East London, is a very culturally diverse area. Where they came from would be a largely immigrant population that tends to congregate there, first, second generation, from all over the world, really. But you do see concentrations of Pakistani and also other Muslim communities, but it has a broad range of people. But largely, you're seeing that community and overtly kind of early generation immigration population. It is diverse, but not overly wealthy necessarily. That is how the Barking population is. We do know, as you said, the 27-year-old was originally from Pakistan, but grew up in London, as we have come to understand, and the worry is that these men who were killed and committed the terror attack were very much spent a lot of time in Britain. They were not fresh immigrants, and that is the worry, this lack of integration, that the perpetrators seem to be isolated from the majority of the British community, and that is the worry of the wider population, and why that conversation today really has been how to integrate these populations better so they feel British and not outside of the British culture.
All right, Mandy, let me also follow up with you. Earlier on in the discussion, when we broke this story, we talked about, the Channel 4 documentary as reported by the Telegraph, UK publication, that the fact that some of these suspects, if not all of them, were in a Channel 4 documentary, and they were already, the images were blurred, they were out there in this jihadi documentary footage, and unfortunately, from at least what we know, no action was taken. Perhaps these suspects were on a watch list, perhaps they were known to authorities, but not enough evidence to maybe formally arrest them. Is the UK too liberal when it comes to dealing with radical Islam or radical terrorists? 3 attacks in 3 months, certainly surprising, but is enough being done by the proper authorities to prevent such attacks on UK soil?
Well, it's difficult to know. Certainly, it's the population's mindset has focused on really stopping terrors, and having as you pointed out, 3 terror attacks, 3 months. It's a lot for the country to take, and we're seeing a lot of the attacks in Europe as well. So it's in a setting of numerous terrorist attacks happening one after another. Is enough being done about it? Well, clearly not. The question is, how do you prevent these terrorist attacks? The difficulty with these type of attacks is they're low tech. Is that anyone with a driver's license can rent a van. You don't need a license to buy a knife. And the Westminster attack had the same modus operandi, the same technique as the attack we've just seen. It's a vehicle and it's a knife, and it's very hard to fight against these type of attacks when it doesn't require a lot of planning, and that is the difficulty that the police are facing. When it comes to more complicated threats, they seem to be able to foil them, and they said just recently they have foiled 5 terror plots. But certainly Britain is the focus at the minute for terrorists, and it's difficult to stop each and every one. The question is, how are they going to stop it? The focus recently has been upping police numbers, particularly armed police numbers, because in the UK, most police officers do not carry firearms.
All right, let me go over to Emil Gesson, also standing by. Emil, my question to you is with regards to what is happening in the UK. As we mentioned, the third attack on UK soil, the third terror attack. Is this perhaps shedding a negative light on the immigrant community, the minorities, those who seek a better life in the UK, perhaps making it more difficult now because of cases like these? Again, these are individuals, perhaps extreme individuals who are inspired by other groups. But in this case, as we mentioned, the 27-year-old Karam Shahzad Boot, the British citizen born in Pakistan, and the 30-year-old Rashid Redwan, claiming to be a Moroccan or a Libyan. Does this make it more difficult for immigrants to perhaps feel at home in the UK? Could we see more Islamophobia? Could we see more racial attacks on minorities and immigrants after images like these suspects' identities are released?
Totally, you're totally right there. A lot of people, and I was speaking with a gentleman the other night on Saturday night after we found out about the London attack, who's Palestinian, and he was telling me about him having abuse, being called Pakistani, go back to your own country. Even myself, being half Syrian, but I served 12 years in the Royal Marines. I was born in Britain. I served my military here. I've even been told on social media, go back to Syria and take all the terrorists with you. So even I'm receiving abuse, being British myself. And it comes down to ignorance. And there's a lot of people out there very ignorant to what's going on. A lot of people are giving abuse to Sikhs. Totally ridiculous. So in the UK at the moment, there is a little bit of resentment from people. With certain people, I would say it's the minority, who are looking towards the migrant community saying, well, we're blaming you. We're blaming the Islamic community for these attacks. And, yeah, of course, we always see a spike. We've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in France and Germany and Belgium. There's always a spike in abuse against people, and especially migrants. So people try and integrate into the UK, and majority of them are integrating in the UK. But there are small minorities within our society that aren't integrated. And this is what needs to be tackled here. But definitely, there has been a spike in abuse towards these people. And like I was saying, even myself, I've received it. It's ridiculous.
All right, I also want to get a quick update into our viewers just joining us. The Metropolitan Police has just released more information about these two suspects. Here's what we do know. They are saying that they did know one of the suspects. They were known to him. That is the person to the left of your screen. That is Karam Shahzad Boot. Police did know this suspect. He was known to the police as well as MI5, but no intelligence to suggest that this attack was being planned or that the investigation had been prioritized accordingly. The other man, the man to the right of your screen, that is 30-year-old Rashid Redwan. He was not known to police. Again, we do not have the name or the identity of the third suspect. There were three suspects who were responsible for the London terror attack. The third one also, police shooting all three of them and killing them on Saturday night within 8 minutes after they went on a stabbing spree at London Bridge and nearby Borough Market, ramming their van into passengers and then stabbing people at bars and restaurants there. Let me go over to Joel Whitaker. Joel, I'm reading up on the Met. They're saying there's about 500 current terrorism investigations, about 3,000 current subjects of interest. So that's a lot. That's a lot of number of people to keep a close watch on, to deal with. So whether or not, the blame perhaps is with intelligence authorities or agencies, I mean, they can only do so much. But could things change going forward, especially with the elections right on the horizon? Could national security be the spotlight when it comes to that? And going forward, no matter if Jeremy Corbyn or Theresa May win?
Certainly, and I don't think that the UK are blaming their security services in any way. I think that, if anything, the government would be to blame for not putting enough resources, enough money, and enough people into the intelligence services. And perhaps then that's why so many potential terrorists and people who are friendly towards them are able to operate and talk freely about terrorist acts within the UK, as we've seen over the media recently. It's just to go back to what you mentioned earlier on about the spike in activity within the UK, and your London bureau correspondent spoke about also. Terrorist acts do spike. They spiked, as Emil said, they spiked in Germany. They spiked in France. They get so many acts done, so many terrorist acts done, and then obviously the pressure comes upon those terrorist groups by security services, by their own people, to slow down, to stop the attacks, do it elsewhere. so that they don't lose all their infrastructure, all the terrorist infrastructure within that region, within that country. And so you might actually find that looking ahead, once a lot of the focus is off the UK, particularly after the election, it spikes elsewhere. It spikes in Spain or wherever. But that's just a bit of intelligence for you on the ground with regards to the spikes. But also, I just wanted to bring that into the bigger picture. If you look at terrorist organisations rather than just terrorist acts, terrorist organisations also spike. You know, you haven't heard much about Al Qaeda for the last sort of couple of years. It's all been about IS, Daesh, Syria, northern Iraq. You may find that IS, Daesh now will soon go out of fashion, if you want to call it that, and Al Qaeda make a re-emergence. They spike as well.
All right, Manny, let me also ask you really quickly a follow-up question to that, what we heard from Joel and Emil with regards to the bigger picture in the UK. Perhaps, the community, the Sikh community, the Muslim community, perhaps even the Hindu community, the other minority organizations, the other religious groups there in the UK, do they have a little bit more, do they have to be a bit more on edge given situations like this because of perhaps a retaliation? We know that happened after 9/11 in the U.S., where Sikhs were mistakenly identified as Muslims and people were attacking them. Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs or other minority groups in the UK, do they have to be a little bit more on edge given a terror attack or a situation like this, especially the fact that the suspects are now identified as of non-British origin?
Well, yeah, and after every terror attack, it's not often heavily reported, but there is a spike in hate crimes. We saw that just even after the Manchester bombing. And you're right, it's not just the Muslim community that gets attacked. And police recognize this, and they are not only protecting the streets of London and important buildings, but they are also protecting mosques, places of worship, places where if a hate crime is going to happen, they're going to congregate on those places of worship. And so the police are doing what they can to provide that extra layer of security, not to just the British people, but also the minority community that might face those misguided retribution and attacks. And so in all likelihood, people of the minority community will be more on edge. But being on the ground the day after the London terror attack, I saw all faith groups come around to offer food. A Muslim mosque just down the road came over to explain why they would never support this terrorist act, that it isn't a part of moderate Islam. So you do see communities wanting to reach out and help other people understand and publicly grieve, because it wasn't attack on just white British people, it was attack on the British way of life that includes minorities. So yes, they will be on edge, but I think the majority will also fear the terror attacks that threaten everyone in the country.
And speaking of that, Mandy, you were actually on the ground there. You were at Manchester as well 2 weeks back. You were here in London where the scene of the attack unfolded Saturday night, just hours after that, giving us reports and talking to people there, getting a feel of the situation. Certainly people on edge, people concerned, but what were you picking up? Was it really business as usual on a Sunday there, or were people just sort of afraid and, just being extra cautious and staying inside, worried about a possible other attack, or just sort of dealing with a situation at such an iconic landmark?
Well, I think and unfortunately, it's not just Manchester, it's not just London. I've been in the UK also after the 7/7 bombing, so I've gotten to know the UK mentality, and there is a level of stoicism and defiance in maintaining their way of life, in continuing as normal. That is their rebellion. That is the way they say the terrorists will win. I'm going to continue to take the tube the next day after the 7/7 attack. I'm going to walk on the bridge as I get to work. That's what we saw today. So yes, there is nervousness, but there is a level of stoicism and defiance in the face of terrorism. And I think that is the main kind of sense I get after a terror attack is ready.
All right, let me go over to Joel Whitaker standing by really quickly as well. Joel, just days away now from the election there, the June 8th election. Theresa May says they will not postpone those elections. It will happen. Could voter turnout perhaps change given the fact that, there have been 3 attacks, one just within a week of the elections? Could that perhaps not only impact and play a role in the next leader for the UK?
Yeah, certainly. And if you look at Labour and who they've been targeting a demographic that typically doesn't vote that much, which is the younger generation. And I'm sure that as well as before this London attack, they were certainly canvassing through digital means. I'm certainly sure that Labour are canvassing through digital means, and that they can provide security for this younger generation. So I think, whichever party can convince a voting public that they are the strongest party, that they can provide the most strength, the most security for the UK population, I'm sure that's going to help sway. But as Mandy said, the Brits are pretty stoic. They're used to terrorist acts. There have been terrorist acts within the UK the last 40, 50 years. From Northern Ireland, the distant Irish issue with the IRA. So with that, it may not sway them that much. They're sort of used to terrorism, as horrible as that sounds. So yes, they will be swayed by strength, by strong leadership, but I do believe that will be on the policies of what that party says it will carry out, as well as the sort of strength, the security issue.
All right, let me go over to Emil standing by as well. Emil, we just heard from Mandy a short while ago talking about the mood in London, what it was like on the ground dealing with the shock of this most recent terror attack. You were in Manchester. There was another attack there 2 weeks ago. 22 people were killed. In fact, since we spoke, that concert with Ariana Grande already took place, the memorial concert, the benefit concert, which after she canceled her tour. In fact, there's also going to be a vigil, we understand, Monday night in London, as well as a moment of silence at the London Bridge to honor the 7 victims. What about the mood in the other parts of Manchester? And, the broader question is the UK just too liberal when it comes to dealing with situations like this? Is the UK sort of to blame for allowing homegrown terror to happen on its own soil? Could they have been more strict?
This is a brilliant question, and this is what a lot of people are asking. Are we too liberal here in the United Kingdom? And the fact is, across the country, people are a bit nervous. People aren't scared. This is Great Britain. As Joel was saying, we're used to terrorist attacks, so it is bad to say, but nothing will stop us in this country. And people will go on as normal, and they remember the people that have passed. But the question going back to, is this country too liberal? My personal opinion is yes. We need to be tougher with these thousands of people out on these watch lists. We need to start clamping down on these people within their communities and finding out why they become radicalised and taking them off the streets. So, yeah, a lot of people in the UK are asking that question now. And as we come to the run-up to the general election, as Joel was saying, people are looking for a strong leader. And as we can see from the dialogue that Theresa May's doing, she's trying to talk strong. And Jeremy Corbyn's, he's saying that when she was the Home Secretary, she cut the police force, slashed the military and such. So at the moment, as we go to the polls in a few days' time, it's going to be close on who's actually going to win there. But people are going to be looking, as priority at the moment is security, and who's going to take us into the next leadership, who's going to provide that security for people. So both politicians are talking tough at the moment, but within what I'm sensing here in the UK, a lot of people don't trust Jeremy Corbyn's mentality when it comes to the security of the UK, especially on Trident. He was talked about getting rid of Trident. He's done a U-turn on talk about the armed forces, saying that he wants to increase ships, planes and such. So he's now trying to talk tough, monitoring what people want, and Theresa May's trying to talk tough. But at the moment, it's all talk. And people here in the UK want to see action. They want something done about the terrorism and the terrorists that live in amongst us.
All right. Thank you to all of our guests for their inputs and perspective. Joel Whitaker, Emil Gesson, and Mandy Clark.